Hello, everyone, and welcome to this workshop today on spring cleaning, how to go ahead and simplify your nonprofit's grant process in under 60 minutes. This is a presentation where we're going to go over some fundamentals of the grant process to help you and your organization as you start to think ahead about the next few weeks and months of your nonprofit's grant seeking efforts. If you haven't already chimed into the chat box, feel free to chime in with your name, organization, where you're calling in from. And the other thing I want to remind you about is that this presentation is being recorded and slides will be shared with you afterwards. So the title for today's presentation is Spring Cleaning, How to Simplify Your Nonprofit's Grant Process in Under 60 Minutes. We've got a tight agenda, so I'm going to keep moving things along throughout the way. But in the case where you miss any particular section of this presentation, again, feel free to look out for the replay, which my colleague Deanna, who's also on this call, will be more than happy to send that over afterwards. If you have any questions along the way, please do feel free to leave them in the chat box. To do so, we ask that you throw in 3 hashtags in front of that question, just to make it easier for us to spot that question. And then what will happen is my colleague Deanna will then be able to flag out that she has gotten your question as well. All right, so for today, we are your hosts. I'm going to also add a pin for Deanna here as well, and myself. Let me go ahead and do that. One sec. And if not, what will also happen is we'll be able to introduce ourselves in the spotlight section afterwards as well. But essentially, I'm Will. I lead growth and customer success at Instrumentl, and Diana is our partnerships marketing manager. So in the case where you're ever attending our regular workshops for these sorts of events, you'll often see her face and leading those discussions. All right, so before we get started today, I just want to hear from folks in the audience in the Zoom chat if any of these situations resonate with you. Potentially, you've generated a long list of funding opportunities and prospects, and you have no idea what to do next. Maybe recently you created your free Instrumentl account and you have hundreds of grant opportunities, but you don't know which ones you should actually be pursuing in terms of the next opportunity. Or maybe you're spending every single week double checking funder deadlines and guidelines just to make sure that you haven't missed some sort of change from the funder's requirements. It's also possible that you've felt ill-equipped when it comes to reporting up to your board of directors or executive director in everything that's happening with respect to grants. We don't have to worry because we're going to cover all these bases and more in the next hour, so that hopefully what happens is that this can be you. You're going to be in a place in which you can stay more organized. It'll be difficult for you to miss deadlines and opportunities and toggle between different situations in which you'll have, a reliable personal assistant, or in the case where you don't use Instrumentl, at least a framework for you to take back into your organization so that you can be better prepared for your grant seeking efforts in the months ahead. Remember, grants are worth it. There are over 87,000 grant-making foundations out there and 14,000 grants alone that are just active on Instrumentl, and we're adding 100 plus every single week. And so it's something in which if you don't think that you can find the right opportunity, I would challenge you on that assumption because in many cases there is a funder out there, but it's about finding that mission matching process for you to find the best fit funder. The other thing to keep in mind is that I know a few of you in the chat today mentioned that you might be fundraising more for like startup or sustainability phases of a nonprofit. Something I will give you as a precursor is that a lot of times foundations are not going to fund you right out of the gate when you're just starting out. In many cases, it might be better for you to be pursuing individual fundraising or other funding avenues as opposed to grants, just because those funders are going to be looking for nonprofits that have already answered the sustainability question. That's not to say that you won't be able to take value out of this presentation, but it does mean that I just want to manage your expectations that, grants are not necessarily just a silver bullet when it comes to fundraising in that regard. For our agenda today, what we're first going to do is we're going to explore what are the 3 must-haves when it comes to maximizing your grant success. We will then explore how you can stay on top of your grant deadlines across your entire team with the use of a grants calendar. And then we'll also talk about how you can save time reporting up to your board of directors and executive director and everything happening in your grants world. One of the things we'll also explore is how some of the new features that Instrumentl has released most recently can also help you in achieving all of these respective goals and jobs to be done. So stay tuned for that. But let's first dig into the 3 must-haves when it comes to setting yourself up for grant success. All right, so when it comes to really establishing your organization and preparing it to scale its grant strategy, it can really be boiled down into a simple framework that we call the PPT framework. This is a framework that was introduced in the early 1960s, and then it was popularized in the late 1990s among a lot of technology firms, but it can also be applied to the process of grant seeking. And when we think about that, it really comes down to the 3 areas of people, process, and technology. So you can see on my right-hand side here, I've got this Venn diagram of people, process, and technology. And what we're really thinking about is in the context of grants, all 3 of these components are important. And what we're really looking for is we're looking for that sweet spot across all 3 in order for our organization to be in a really strong place. When it comes to this, this means that, these all have a interdependent relationship with one another in which you need one in order to be successful in another area and so on. What do I mean by that? Well, ultimately, when it comes to grants, there is nobody that's going to write grants for you. I know there's people out there that are all talking about ChatGPT and AI writing and whatnot, but we're a far ways off from reaching the point in which we can consistently rely on those sorts of things. And ultimately, people are doing the work. Each of you today that are grant writers in the audience are doing the actual work of writing that curated proposal that's actually going to fulfill the needs of what that funder wants. And also, processes make it so that the work is more efficient. If you don't have a process within your organization, it's very difficult for you to predictably anticipate how many grants you're going to apply for. And if you don't know how many grants you're going to apply for, then it also means that you're not going to be able to accurately report up to your board of directors or your executive director on exactly how many grants you're going to be able to finish by the end of the year and what your general ballpark estimate is for in terms of how many grants you're going to be able to win for your organization. And lastly, technology really helps automate the process in which really, when you think about it, if you have the right tools in your toolkit, it really allows you to save a lot of time as well as relieve some stress when it comes to just keeping tabs on all those little small things that are so, seemingly minor, but yet they stack over time when it comes to preparing a grant and getting it all the way through that submission process. So the reason why we like to start out with this PPT framework is because it really emphasizes balance. And you can think of it like a 3-legged stool in which if you don't have one as steady or consistent as another, then it can lead to imbalance. And when you have things out of balance, it can feel a lot more stressful in a particular area than another area because you don't have people, process, or technology in place. And when we look at this, we really think about it in the context of the fact that everything has to adapt to your current and future problems of your organization. It's very possible that some of you today already have, multiple years worth of a grants process developed, whereas others are just starting out in your journey. And the thing that's important to think about within the lens of the people, process, technology framework is that where you are today is not what's going to get you to where you need to go tomorrow. In many cases, organizations have to evolve either in people, either in process or in technology or in all of them. And as such, you have to remember that it's a fluid process of iteration in which everything can impact another aspect. And when you think about this, we can then start looking at how this might influence things within the context of a nonprofit. If we don't have the people, ultimately we ask questions like, how are we going to write the grants? How do we meet reporting requirements? How do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we even ensure that our proposals are going to reflect our organization's values? That's going to be one of the challenges, as we continue to look towards different tools to help and to facilitate the grant writing process. In that ultimately, if we don't have that human element to it, then that's going to be really difficult to make sure that we're aligning the missions of our organizations to the fundraising opportunities that we have. Similarly, if we don't have the process, I alluded to some of this, but you have to be able to ask yourself the question of then, how are we going to stay on top of grant deadlines? If a funder has a deadline in the middle of April, but we don't know the exact steps that our organization is going to take in order to get that proposal through the door on time, then we can't consistently and reliably anticipate whether or not we're going to be able to meet that submission goal. How do we know which grants to pursue versus which to ignore? This is an entire topic within itself. We have a free workshop that you can, check out after this workshop in terms of, the go versus no go framework that we teach in terms of asking yourself, 14 to 15 key questions of evaluating funder fit to your grants, to your grant strategy. And then from there, prioritizing those opportunities accordingly. And then also, if you don't have the process, it's pretty much virtually impossible for you to scale your grant strategy. And the reason why I say that is because you might be the greatest grant writer of the last few decades, but if you do not actually have a process or strategy that you can scale beyond yourself, you are always going to be limited by your own time as well as your own bandwidth. And so most of the time, organizations that are able to scale up, win more grants, apply for more grants are the ones that are able to build out their teams as well, so that one person is specialized in the research process, for example, while another person is specialized in the writing and another person is specialized in the reporting side of things and so on. So thinking about how to scale your grant strategy can be so, so important as well. And then lastly, if we don't have the technology, there's going to be concerns when it comes to the people and the process side, in that we'll start to ask ourselves questions like, how do we avoid staff burnout? This is a very common challenge within the grant writing profession. If you have checked out, if you're a member of the Grant Professionals Association, or you've checked out some of the annual studies with grant writers, burnout is a constant challenge that folks are struggling with. And we'll even, we have a blog post on this as well in terms of what we found when we studied grant writer burnout as well. And we can share that in the links in the Zoom chat later. But also, you're going to be asking yourself, like, how does our organization stay organized across the board? So if you have a 5-person grant writing team, is it clear what everybody's doing? Or is everybody kind of looking at each other, pointing and trying to figure out exactly where everything's going to go in terms of the tasks? Also, how do we bolster collaboration across stakeholders? A common challenge that we hear every single week from nonprofits are cases in which not every single person is clear on who is doing what. And as a result, it leads to information silos, in which what happens is, as you as a grant writer are writing a proposal, you don't know who to go to for a particular question about your organization, because that sort of hierarchy has not actually been established. And it's really difficult to chase down exactly who you should ask in order to, get the answer to that particular answer that you have to provide in your application. And then lastly, it's like, how do you achieve more with the same size team? Every single week, we're running grant writing workshops and different workshops with our partners. And this is a common challenge across the board in both small and larger nonprofit organizations, in that all of our teams are always small. And so we have to make more with the people that we do have. And the best way that we can often do that is through using better tools to save us time and lessen that load of impact across the entire team. So this is the part in which where I would like you to reflect is, does your organization have all of these 3 must-haves? Are you stronger in one area than another? And this is something in which, as you start to think about this, I'm gonna pause, let you process that. What I'm gonna do is I'm also gonna put up a poll for you to go ahead and answer this question and see, which of these things do you feel is strongest within your organization? Is it people? Is it process? Is it technology? And then as you answer this question, what I want you to also take a step back and think about is, what do you feel like your organization is weakest in? And then from there, maybe you can jot down 2 or 3 things that could potentially improve that. Or on the flip side of things, think about what you already know is strongest in your organization, and write down why you think it's so strong there, right? And I would love to hear from the folks who have already been answering this poll question. As you answered what you answered, why is it that you answered what you did in terms of that being strongest? What is it about that attribute, whether it was people, whether it was process or technology, that makes it so strong in your organization? And so I'll look out in the Zoom chat for some responses there. I'll share the results, and then we'll continue to kind of have this conversation about the people, process, and technology side of things. Awesome. So Katie's mentioning in the chat, the will is there, but the tech and time are not. That's a great point for sure. It's something in which managing that time, finding the time for grants is oftentimes the biggest thing that we have to kind of emphasize with folks. And that's also why I kind of gave that precursor to earlier on for the folks that might be in the room that are earlier on in their grants journey, is that sometimes people are so excited about, the thousands of opportunities and grants out there that they really want to jump into grants, but actually it's not the best time for them to be pursuing grants. And figuring out whether or not you're grant ready is a whole nother workshop topic that we've covered before as well. So I love how Carmen's sharing, our people are great, fearless, willing to try, willing to fail, willing to try again. They say yes to opportunity, and we're supportive of each other. And I love that. I mean, ultimately, when you think about it, of these three things, that's what makes us all human, right? That's what makes this so exciting, that you're in a room right now with, another, 70 or so grant writers who are all on the same mission, or nonprofit professionals that are all on the same mission of making and expanding their impact as much as possible. And so we see technology. Regina had technology. We have another person mentioned strongest in people, with a great culture, lacking in time, tech, and processes. And so I love how people are, talking about all these different things. And what I'm hopeful for, as I kind of went over this framework, is that as you think about spring cleaning and you just think about preparing your organization for the road ahead, whether it's the rest of the next quarter or the rest of the year, I want you to think about what that strength is in terms of that strongest area, and how could you potentially apply parts of that strength into another area that your organization is a little bit less strong in. So for example, one of the things that Carmen mentioned is they're more than willing to do something, fail, try it again. How can you apply that to your process? How can you apply that to your technology? How can you leverage the strength that your organization already has into another area so that it can continue to develop and expand itself on that side of things? So that's what I wanted to share there. And I'm going to go ahead and share the Zoom poll. Here you can see the results here. So 63% of you are saying people is where we are strongest most. And then you'll notice that the minority typically comes in with process and technology. So only 20% are saying process is strongest, and technology is only at 18%. And what I'd tell you is, if you find yourself in the latter realms of process and technology, that's awesome. But if you find yourself in the people world of things, know that that's actually the most common response. When we run this, question in the past, almost everyone will always say that people is their strongest attribute. And so when you think about that, again, I want you to think about what I just referenced, in that how can you really leverage the strength of the people in terms of improving, the process and the technology as well. So same thing with this. When you think about, if you're one of the people that had process or technology as your number one attribute, I want you to think about what makes that process or technology so much better than people, and how can we kind of bridge the gap using that same sort of edge or strength that you have in your process and your technology. All right. So hopefully that got some gears turning. That's what the goal is with respect to this workshop. But Katie's mentioning, when I said people are strongest, I was talking about me. I am people. Yeah, you are. And that's, I love that as well, in terms of making sure that, if you think that you are really the anchor behind it all, that's definitely awesome. And that's something in which you should lean into that, and then think about how you can leverage yourself even more through, whether it's improving a process or technology as well. All right. So these three must-haves are really at the core of what we've built with Instrumentl. Ultimately, how Instrumentl helps you is we serve as your all-in-one grants tool. It's these are literal customer quotes, in that we are the most robust grants database anyone's ever used, and they've used several. The best site when it comes to grant research, literally changing their grant-seeking life, for the definitive database for grant research, the hammer in the toolbox that you go for whenever you need to get something done, or just in general, the one-stop grant research database and time saver. So we'll share a little bit more about some of the ways that our new spring release is helping you in leveling up your process, your technology, as well as supporting your people. But before we do that, let's talk about how we can better stay on top of important grant deadlines. All right, so another poll time. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to launch this poll on how many of you are using a grants calendar. And I already know what this is going to probably end in, because I've asked this question in the past, but I'm curious to see if it might have changed from the last time that I've asked this question. All right. So we're almost at we're almost at 70%. Okay, we're getting close to 75% responses. Awesome. I'm going to close this out in just a little bit. So get your responses in. And this is exactly what I expected it to be. So it's crazy. I've run this question hundreds of times, and the breakdown always comes out about the same. It's a weird experience. It's of deja vu, but I'm excited to share this with you because then you will learn whether or not which side of the camp you fall into, and it's totally fine if you're on either side here. But essentially, what you'll see is that 38% of you are currently using a grants calendar, and 62% of you are currently not using a grants calendar. This 40-60 split is almost always the answer that I get. So don't be alarmed if you are part of the audience that is not using a grants calendar. But at the same time, if you are using a grants calendar, hopefully you'll be able to take a few suggestions and ideas in terms of ways to level up your grants calendar from what you might be currently doing already. So now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about what a grants calendar is, since 60% of you are currently not using a grants calendar. Ultimately, a grants calendar is all about tracking your current and past grant applications. It is the home to everything important in terms of strategic priorities when it comes to grant seeking. There are different tools out there. I know that somebody's mentioning in the chat that they're using a to-do app like Monday.com to do that, but this is something in which, however you want to get it done, the important thing is that you are tracking your current and past grant applications. In this screenshot on the right-hand side, you can see how this gets visualized in Instrumentl. But essentially, when you start saving opportunities, you're going to have this nice little view in which you can see exactly, oh, here are the tasks coming up. Here are the grant submissions and deadlines that might be due in the coming future. There's 5 reasons why this is so important in terms of your grant success and being able to continue to scale your grant strategy. The first one is it improves your time management. So if you're using a grants calendar, you're going to make sure, or at least improve, on the fact that you're not going to miss as many grant or reporting deadlines. It allows for you to better plan out tasks and avoid duplicative work. Some of you might not be in just a team of yourself. You might have others to rely on. And so it can be really important to make sure that across a multi-person team that you guys aren't doing the same work, because that's just not, that's not efficient and it's not useful for people. And everybody's just going to get frustrated if people are doing the same thing. The second reason why grants calendars are so important is because it helps promote collaboration. It will build transparency across your team, allow you to delegate tasks, easily report on goals, as well as share information faster. Remember, when we were looking at that first question today, the bulk of you guys are saying people is your strongest area, but process and technology is not. And so what you need to start to think about is, how can I leverage the fact that my people are great and introduce new elements of process or technology to improve across the overall spectrum of just like overall our grant strategy in the PPT framework. Also, it helps you build a library of records. So this is something in which, in some cases, folks are not always keeping in mind who they've already applied to and then reevaluating that funder in the next funding cycle. So having a history of, what went well, what didn't go well in 2022. And then before long, we'll be talking about what went well and what didn't go well in the first half of 2023 can be really useful for you as you start to plan ahead, whether it's in the most immediate quarter or a couple quarters from now, or as you start to reflect back on, the entirety of this year and the grant seeking process that you took for your overall strategy. The fourth reason why grants calendars are so important is because it helps you elevate your strategic planning. You can track forward progress, identify areas for improvement, along with just in general goal setting for the future. So if you have built a grants calendar, you would be able to answer questions like, hey, in the last 2 months, how many grants have you applied for? If you don't know the answer right off the top of your head and you'd have to reference that, then you know that you're potentially in a position where it's time for you to start thinking about a grants calendar. Because what you get with that grants calendar is you not only get the accountability of what are you doing in the immediate time period of like the next week or a few weeks and whatnot, but you also get the immediate feedback of being able to reflect backwards in a more immediate fashion. And lastly, you're able to create capacity beyond grants or fundraising. When you are able to get your grants program into a flywheel in which every single week you consistently know how to find opportunities, apply for those opportunities, and submit those opportunities, it allows you to then allocate some more focus towards other sides of your organization, such as program development or reputation building. So There's really 5 steps that you can take here when it comes to building your own grants calendar. For the 62% of you in the room that are not currently using a grants calendar or a tracker template, I'm going to share a free template with you today for learning along with us as I dig into step number 2. But the first thing you want to do is you just want to make sure that you're determining what is important to track. This is often where you're going to ask yourself questions like, what are the past funding trends? Who is writing the grant? When is the submission deadline? Or how much am I going to request from the funder here? If you don't know the answer to all these questions, you have to conduct that research. There are a lot faster ways to do that. For example, if you create a search for free on Instrumentl, what you'll see is you'll see all this detailed information about exactly how much a funder is giving towards certain cause areas so that you can do that mission matching a lot faster. The second thing, though, once you determine what's important to track, is you can take stock of your existing relationships. So this is where you can use this free grant template that I'll provide in the Zoom chat right now. But essentially, if you use that template, it'll be a great way for you to start building out a tracker from all the things that you may have already historically done. So if you don't already have a tracker, feel free to use that Excel spreadsheet as a starting point and then start just tracking all the things that you've done in the past. You can also shortlist new opportunities from the matches you got earlier. So something that we're going to potentially go over if we have enough time is we'll go over creating free accounts on Instrumentl as well. But in the case where you already are in the audience and you have an Instrumentl account, you'll be able to get those matches and essentially start to save some of those opportunities. Fourth thing you're going to want to do when it comes to building your grant calendar is you're going to want to organize your tracker. You need to take stock of what's rolling versus what is not, as well as add tasks and ownership on different grants. So this is something in which, as you do this, what it's going to make you do is it's going to make sure that you're planning ahead on not only what you're going to be working on this week, but also what you're going to be working on in the next few weeks after that. And when you do that, it allows you to start building this habit in which every week or every few weeks, you're reviewing your grants calendar, you're reviewing and updating your tracker. And from there, you're able to see what's actually working and what is not. So just to kind of show you how this might look within a world like, an Instrumentl, this is something in which when you create a free account on Instrumentl, which I think my colleague Diana can provide a link for you in the chat if you haven't already before, you're going to have this series of matches, which is going to tell you, hey, I have this air quality project and here are all the funding opportunities that I'm pursuing. And from here, what you can do is you can save that opportunity into your tracker. And when you save that opportunity into your tracker, you're going to start to build out this grants calendar, in which over time, what you see here is that I have 28 opportunities that I've been working on between this year and next year. And I'm essentially able to organize everything I need in terms of what exactly I'm working towards, such as the amount that I'm fundraising for, my next task for different things. So here you can see I've got some reporting tasks and some submission guidelines as well. And what I'm then able to do is I'm able to say, hey, if my boss ever asks me, what have you been up to all week, Will? Well, I can answer the question and say, well, let me tell you, like, here's the grants calendar. Here's what's coming up next in terms of, my calendar. I don't have much for March, but coming up in April, I got this opportunity on April 15th that's coming up for the full proposal. And that's what I'm going to be working on next. And then as I keep on creating more and more opportunities in my tracker, I will then be able to consistently build upon that and then download reports in a way that make it so that it's easy for me to track exactly what is going on in terms of everything grant strategy. And that's something that I'm really excited to share with you all today, which is one of the things that we are, including with this presentation is we've recently just launched our summer 2023 release. So in case you've never explored Instrumentl or you explored it a while back and it was a different time in the world, well, we're changing the game once more when it comes to bringing everything into one place for grants. And again, this all comes back to that idea that at the end of the day, Instrumentl is built on improving people, process, as well as technology. We look at ourselves as a force multiplier on the ability for nonprofits to deliver impact. And how we're doing this with our spring launch is through improved grant and funder tracking, preset reports, new filters, as well as your stats, which allow you to see insights into your usage of how you are using our software best. When it comes to the improved grant and funder tracking. Now, more than ever, it's easier for you to manage the entire history with your funder all in one place. So what you can see in this particular example with the Brabson Library and Educational Foundation is that I can see all the information about past funding histories of this funder, as well as contact information, while also leaving notes and contacts all within the same sort of modal view that you see when you're in Instrumentl. So imagine if you were to take your Rolodex of all your foundation contacts, your past spreadsheet or the thing that you might be working on out of Airtable, or, as somebody mentioned in the chat, monday.com, but also bring in matches every single week coming to your inbox and all these task reminders as well. And everything about that funder's history also looped into the same place. And that's the beauty of essentially what we're doing with, this improved funder view. You have this delineation where you can see, oh, I've worked on this opportunity in 2023, but I also am planning to work on it in 2024. And it's something in which I can also research the funder in the same view, all in one place, as opposed to looking in multiple places. You also see this in the funding opportunity view. So now you can see funding opportunity actions in which when you're clicking into the funding opportunity, you can see the overview of the grant, what are some of the things that we're working on, as well as saved opportunities. And you'll see all the things about exactly what's going on in that opportunity. Tracking is also easier than ever. So now essentially what you can do is you can track award periods from the start and the end dates and make it so that everything is consolidated as you're starting to go through all these different things that you need to keep tabs on in the grant seeking process. Documents and resources are also improved as well, in which now you can save securely funder portal logins. So if you're applying for 15 different grants and all the foundations have different login portals, you no longer have to keep a separate password manager in order to keep those in place. Instead, you can put these in a place in which it's easy to access. It's stored with everything else. So for example, my March grant application for the Brabson Library and Educational Foundation is also in the same place. And it makes it so that if I or anybody else on my team are working on, grants related to this particular foundation, they can get caught up to speed really quickly. The second thing that we're doing with respect to our summer release, or our spring release rather, is we are creating reports, improved reports really. So in the past, you were able to download reports from Instrumentl, but now we have 4 types of reports that we now support. The first one is, we have the opportunities report, which has been in Instrumentl in the past, but the new ones are tasks, contacts, as well as funders. So if you ever are in a situation where you have a one-on-one coming up with your boss and they want to run down in terms of what you might be working on in the next week, it's now easier than ever for you to just create a task report for your boss to then review what you're focusing on. Or in the case where you have a list of contacts that you want to share with your board of directors to see if anyone has any existing relationships, it's now easier than ever for you to just go ahead and download those contacts and share that with your board. Same thing when it comes to funders. If you're doing some preliminary research, you want to make sure that everybody's on the same page as to which of your opportunities you want to actually pursue. It's now easier than ever for you to get that in place. The third thing with respect to our summer release is new filters for opportunity matches. So if you tried Instrumentl in the past, you know that we already had some very advanced filters compared to what you might have seen in other grant tools, but we're taking it up a notch even better, which is now you can break things down based off of field of work, as well as past giving histories, and also by location project and residency. So what does this mean? I'll give you a live demo of this in a little bit. But essentially what this means is that in the past, if you had 300 or more opportunities coming back from Instrumentl, you can zero in all the way down to the exact grants that you really, really want to see, so that it makes it easier for you to access everything. So new filters for opportunity matches. And then the last thing that we're shipping is we are shipping your stats, which makes it easier than ever to understand the impact that Instrumentl is having with respect to your organization. You can see exactly how much you've marked in grants awarded. You can also see how much time you've saved in using Instrumentl for your prospecting and research needs, and also things like how many new opportunities are we adding to the site, and just in general, things that might be useful for you to deliver an explanation as to the value of what it means to invest in an all-in-one grants platform. All right, so now we've covered that real quickly. Again, I will, with the time we have left at the end, I'll give a real live demo of some of these things and answer some of the questions I see in the breakdown. of the chat there. But what I want to first go over is just how to save some time reporting up to your board of directors or executive director as well. So what I first want to ask the audience is I want to ask the audience, do you currently utilize your board of directors or ED in your grant writing process? And I'm curious to see what folks say here. All right, so we've got about 65% of folks answering this. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds or so. So get your votes in if you haven't already responded. All right. So what do we see here? What we have is 61% of you do involve your board of directors and executive director in your grant writing process. 39% of you do not. It's like you guys just flipped the results of the other question in grants calendars to see in terms of responses here. But this is something in which we also see this all the time, in which sometimes they don't want to be involved in the process, and other times it's something in which they're super involved in the process, almost too involved in the process. It's always going to be a spectrum, but ultimately, if you do find yourself in the camp where you have utilized your board of directors or your executive director, it can be really helpful when it comes to just refining your grant proposals and your grant strategy as a whole. The reason why board of director and executive director engagement is so important when it comes to the grant writing process is because it really helps connect everybody in a deeper way to the work, right? At the end of the day, at the beginning of this presentation, we talked about the PPT framework, and over 60% of you said your strongest asset in your nonprofit is the people. And so it makes complete sense for you as to why you'd want to involve the other people as well. It's also the case in which you're able to sometimes leverage their expertise. In many cases, there are situations in which boards of directors are sitting on the boards of multiple organizations. And so that can make it so that they actually have connections to other foundations that might be good funders for your organization that you could pursue if you knew that that relationship already existed. Because if they're sitting on the board of your organization and also the board of a similar organization, then there's likely going to be some overlap in terms of funders that are funding the other organization that may not be funding you. And I'll even teach you how to look that up in Instrumentl in the case where you've never done that in the later parts of the presentation with the free time we have after the Q&A. But also it helps you in terms of just making connections, as I just mentioned, and promotes transparency across the organization. Oftentimes, grant writers will express that it's sometimes, really challenging to get buy-in. And a lot of times they say this in the situations where they're unable to get their board of director or executive directors involved in the grants process. So they feel like they're, on an island. If you've ever felt that way and you've, put that in the chat, feel free to let me know. But that's a common thing that I've seen in the past. And a lot of times when it comes to promoting this transparency, it can come down to having the ability to pull these sorts of insights more quickly for your board of directors or your executive director, so that the next time, imagine you're preparing yourself for that next important meeting, you are coming prepared with a breakdown of exactly what you've been pursuing, the things that you have on your docket that you need to work on next, as well as the funders or contacts that you want to review to see if there's any existing relationships. That's exactly what that feature is that I just showed you with our spring release with the reporting side of things. A lot of our customers are using Instrumentl to essentially go and be super prepared for their next meeting with their executive director or their board of directors, so that it makes them look really good in front of both of these parties, as well as it makes so that everybody is more willing to be bought in, because it's clear that, hey, Andy's come prepared to this meeting in which he wants my input on XYZ and so on. And so it's something in which, by having these sorts of reports in place, whether you do it in Instrumentl or you do it in some other platform or some other method that you might be creating yourself, it's really important for you to build that sort of expectation and normalize that excellence of reporting with your organization and with your executive director as well as your board. In the case where they have never been interested in that, you can be the change there in terms of changing that culturally. But what's really important to emphasize is that, what doesn't get measured is not going to actually improve. And so at the end of the day, by measuring these things through these insights, engaging your board, it can really make it into something that is a lot more powerful for your organization. So what are some ways you can do this? Well, you can use the opportunity reports to share your grants pipeline and hone in on grant opportunities that your leadership is passionate about. Maybe you have 10 opportunities, but you just want to get their feedback in terms of which ones you should prioritize because you want them to be excited about the next chapter of your grants and what you're working on this quarter. You can also use task reports to just immediately share, hey, I can do this right now in terms of this other side request that's not related to grants, but here's what's on my docket right now. Here's what I can manage and what I can't do. So I've also had conversations with our customers before in which they use the task reports to actually more effectively manage up to the boards of directors or executive directors who have unrealistic expectations of what they can achieve within a work week. Something in which it's like, hey, it's great that you have these ambitions that you want to, expand in XYZ way. Here's what I currently have on my plate. And if we want to achieve those goals that you're outlining, then we may need to bring in whether it's, part-time help, freelance help, or, full-time help in scaling out the team. So by providing these sorts of task reports, it can reframe that conversation and make it a more productive one as opposed to one in which everyone's a little bit frustrated because they don't see each other's, side of the story. And then contact reports can be really helpful because it can really, provide some connection points, as I mentioned, to who your board of directors or executive director already has connections with. This can facilitate a warm introduction. It can be the easiest way for you to secure some local and regionally based funding in the case where you're able to identify a couple good fit funders. All right, we have covered a ton in terms of the grants process, in terms of philosophically from a strategy standpoint, people, process, technology. We've also covered grants calendar work. We've also covered reporting and engaging with your board and your executive director. Let's talk about 3 learning takeaways. I know we have some questions as well that I'm going to answer, but then we're going to also just make sure that we leave enough time so that I can show around some of the things that we're releasing with our spring release, since I'm really excited about it. And in the case where you have never tried out Instrumentl, again, it's a 14-day free trial. There's no card required, and so you can really just change the way that you're doing grants, and as simple as like within 2 weeks or so. So 3 learning takeaways from today. Number 1, having a strong 3-legged stool is crucial for your grant success. You can ask peers of yours who have been in this profession for decades on just like what they think, has attributed to their success through the years. And I am very confident that many of them will tell you that it was often in cases in which their organizations were successful in people, process, as well as technology. It's something in which if you are not sophisticated in all 3 of those areas, you will struggle when it comes to getting it to the next world of what grants can do for you. Number 2, grants calendars can bring sanity to your grants process, and Instrumentl levels up your grants calendar by integrating tracking and management with prospecting. We do integrate with other calendars like Google. We have, it's a separate add-on in terms of the calendar integration, but we do that as well as Salesforce integration. I'd be happy to share that as well when we get into the demo section, since I've seen that question pop up a few times. And the third one is Instrumentl's preset reports can help speed up the process of reporting up to your board of directors and your executive director. Whether it's in the context of opportunities and making sure that everybody knows exactly what the next opportunity is going to be that you're going to pursue is, or it is managing up in terms of, telling your manager what is on your plate and what is feasible and what is not, or it's just seeing who already has a connection. That can be a great way for you to just level up when it comes to accountability in your organization. And again, by doing that, you're leveling up your people, you're leveling up your process, and you're doing it all with technology. And that's like the beautiful thing of it all. All right, so following up with me or my colleague Diana, my email is will@instrumentl.com. Obviously, you can check out our website at instrumentl.com. If you are a new customer and you've never tried us out, you can save $50 off your first month with this spring 23 month promo. And also you can save a month off an annual plan, which is a total of 2 months off your annual plan with spring 23 annual. We have a freebie for everybody that's joined us live today. My colleague Diana is going to put it in the Zoom chat. It's just a little form. And then from there, what you're going to get is you're going to get the ultimate 5 steps grants calendar planning guide. This is an awesome resource that you can either download and print out, or you can, just look at it on your computer. But it essentially is going to dig more deeply into those 5 steps that I went over pretty quickly today. Obviously, we had a lot of content to cover today, which is why I didn't go as in depth there. But if you are looking for another session where you learn all about these 5 steps, we have an on-demand class where you can check that out. And we'll go step by step into each section of, first determining what's important to track, taking stock of existing relationships, starting to organize everything in place and whatnot. So definitely feel free to check that out in the webinar comments as well. All right. So a few things from here before I open it up for Q&A. I just want to go over the 4 key things as part of our spring release, just so that you kind of understand some of the things that I went over in the presentation today. So I'm going to first start with just like a reminder introduction to what Instrumentl does. For folks who might be in the room, they've never used a grants tool before, and they just want some background information. So Instrumentl is your all-in-one grants tool. It brings grant prospecting, tracking, and management into one place. Over 2,400 nonprofits trust us. And the reason why is because we are the most intuitive way to do your grants work. When you create your free account on Instrumentl, if you haven't already, again, Deanna will share the link in the Zoom chat. What's going to happen is you're going to be able to connect with one of our colleagues, an onboarding advisor who's going to walk you through your project. And when you create a project, like you can see here with this animal welfare project, you're going to tell us exactly where your organization is based out of, what your organization is like, and what are some of the things related to the areas of funding that you are pursuing. When you do this, Instrumentl then has an intelligent matching algorithm that searches against over 14,000 opportunities to find the best fits for you. So what happens is you end up getting this matches list, which will have both active RFPs as well as it's going to have potential good fit funders for you. So in this case, what this is saying is that for my animal welfare project, there are 236 good fit opportunities for us in terms of helping you and immediately starting to search through all these different things. So these are active opportunities that your nonprofit can pursue. You'll notice this is super intuitive. It looks just like an email inbox. And that's with good reason. We want to make it really easy for you to start to do mission matching. So as you go through these results, what's going to happen is you're going to see that when it's possible, we're actually going to give you insights about the funder within the same place where you're seeing that RFP. So what differentiates just one of the many things that differentiates Instrumentl from any of its peers is that we have all of this data about the funder in the same place. So you can see things like, what is the giving average and median? How has that changed over the years? If I'm thinking to myself, how much should I ask in grants from this funder? I can actually look at that information in Instrumentl and see what the historical giving patterns have been. You can also say, hey, if I am in the state of, Missouri, how many recipients have come from the state of Missouri before? What exactly has that funding cause been in the past? And so by bringing all this information into one place, it saves you a ton of time when it comes to that prospecting and researching process. One of the things I mentioned in our spring release was the release of preset reports. So in the past on Instrumentl, you had a few already pretty powerful filters. For example, I can filter by what type of funding use I'm funding for. So it's, project, program, education outreach, gen off for this project. But one of the things with our spring release is now you can zero in on the exact keywords or fields of work that you want to look at. So I have this 236 list of, potential open RFPs, but I can actually toggle in for animal welfare general grants and look for just the 26 of those 236 that specifically have a match to animal welfare. This allows you faster than ever to zero in on the very best fits for you in order to identify even more grants for your organization. The other thing that I mentioned was with this filter release, you now have the capability to also look at things based off of focuses in location of project and location of residency. So here you can see that I have this list of 26 exact matches on animal welfare general. What I can also do is I can also filter for what are the ones where the funder has specifically really brought emphasis towards San Francisco County, California, which is where my project is based out of. And now you can see how from the 236, I've quickly zoomed down into the three that are best fits for me. So this just makes it a lot faster when it comes to digging into things there. One of the other things that we released is with anybody that's on our standard plan or above, we also cross-analyze a funder's historical giving pattern to essentially see what is the past giving to organizations within their location of your project. So if the funder has previously funded, in other words, other organizations within California or within your location of residency, so within San Francisco County, I can zero in all the way down at that level. So that's some of the new filters that we've released. Every single week, Instrumentl is going to tell you new opportunities that are good fits for you based off of these projects. So what's beautiful about a project is you're going to have a saved grant search, as well as you're going to have a tracker for every single one of your projects. So over time, as you build out your master tracker, because you take the advice from today's workshop and building a grants calendar, you're going to have this master tracker, which will essentially detail everything you're fundraising for. This is my command center, and every single one of my projects is going to have one of these master trackers as well. And what you can do is from here, you can really start to see some of the improved grant and funder tracking that I mentioned in the presentation earlier. So if I go ahead and click into this opportunity, for example, what you can see is that funder profile is right here. I can detail exactly what's going on with the funder. I can see all the funding history or planned history that I have with this funder. So I'm planning to apply for it in 2023 as well as 2024. All that sort of tracking information. As I move this along, what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to be able to change the status of these different goals. I can submit everything in terms of the funder profile. So what's their website, the username or password I created, upload my documents in one place. And then let's say I'm in 2024 and I want to start preparing for 2025. All I need to do is just duplicate this. And now I have everything ready for the next time around. So notice how everything gets beautifully kept in the same place. And then in the case where I want to, share with my executive director or my board what I've been up to, I can just simply go to the reporting section of Instrumentl. I can click create a report for my opportunities. Maybe I want to give a report on animal welfare project that I had here. I can choose what statuses I want to give. And then from there, I can go ahead and select, what years. And now I have a PDF and a CSV report ready to go in terms of everything that's ready for my boss. And so in this case, that just makes that easy, where this is a fully customized report that's ready to go for your organization. Same thing applies for these tasks as well as these contact sorts of things. What you can do is you can quickly download all the tasks and contacts and funders that you've saved as well. And then lastly, with the release, we also had your stats. This is a really cool way to learn how to up level your process and use it, do it through technology, in that we'll teach you different ways that you can improve your grant process. So you can see here, for example, I've got a couple projects that don't have goals. So Instrumentl is telling me, hey, here are the ones that don't have goals, and you can start setting those goals in place. Or here's how much time you've saved since you've been using Instrumentl for your prospecting. Or, of all your projects, here's how many new matches Instrumentl has found over the last 3 months on the site. And you'll also see that Instrumentl's team, we're always working for you. So we've added 156 opportunities to Instrumentl alone this week. And you'll also see just like how many reports you've created, how many grants you've saved over time, and things like that. And that's all accessible within, again, the bottom left corner with account and then your stats. All right, so I know we have some questions in the chat. So I'm going to look to start to tackle some of those. And we'll go from there. So Diana, do you want to ask me a couple questions? And then from there, we'll go from there.
Yes, absolutely. First things first, though, want to address the confusion with the freebie link. It should now work. So if you want to access the link, you should be able to fill that out and successfully grab your freebie. So sorry for all of the mix up there, but everyone should be able to access it now. I just popped it again in the chat. It looks like the one question that you did not get to in the chat, Will, is from Katie. Does anyone know of any fundraising software grants that will let me get Instrumentl? This looks great, but I haven't been able to get the board on board yet.
That is a great question. And that's actually something that our team is planning on creating some more resources of how you can find funding for grants that fund technology. And so TBD is my answer there. It's definitely something in which like we want to make sure that you're able to do that as well. And then the other thing that I would say is in terms of getting your board on board, that's funny. What you can do is you can make, if you were able to get the trial in place, what we often tell folks to do is go pursue some of the grants that you found in that 2-week time period. And then if you're able to secure funding from one of those opportunities, it can be a really easy way to circle back with your board and be like, hey, in the 2 weeks that I tried this platform, I found these opportunities. I pursued these opportunities. I won this one. I didn't get this one, whatever. But essentially, a lot of times there are cases in which they'll take that trial period as actually the proving ground to like build advocacy for the program later on. And then essentially circle back with them when that submission deadline is passed and whatnot. So that's what I'd say on that side of things. But yeah, it's definitely on our docket, in which I think one of the assets or resources we'd like to provide is in that area, in terms of just like grants that might be able to fund folks there. And the other thing I wanted to share as well, if you already have an Instrumentl account, is if you are just like trying to learn different ways to pitch Instrumentl to your ED or board, when you go to our pricing page and scroll down to the middle of the page, there's this letter template as well as this PDF explainer. I'll put both in the Zoom chat, but it's just something in which, again, it's very similar to that template link that you can use, in which you can just make a copy of this letter and send it to your board this way. Just makes your life a little bit easier there. And also same thing with respect to just like, what do we do, and trying to explain exactly what it is that Instrumentl does. So definitely check those out if you haven't already. And I'll share both links in the Zoom chat as well.
Looks like we have a couple other questions about integrations, if you want to dig into our current integrations.
Sure. We have 2 primary integrations today. The first one is with respect to a Salesforce integration. And so the way our Salesforce integration works is that it's essentially a one-directional sync. So what that means is you will, from Instrumentl, be doing your work. But essentially, once you set up the sync, you can send that information back into Salesforce at any point in time. I'll show you an example in just a little bit as I get there. But essentially, that's our first integration, is Salesforce. Our second integration is calendars. So we support Outlook, Google, and anything that's using an iCal sort of format. And so when you're looking for that, that is again a one-directional sync. So the work that you're doing in Instrumentl gets sent back into your respective calendars here. And then what you're able to do is you're able to paste that in, and then essentially have that synced in with your work calendars and things like that as well. So those are things that you can find on our standard plans. You can also get them a la carte as add-ons if you talk with your onboarding advisor in terms of options there. But those are the 2 primary integrations we have. I know I'm probably going to have some questions. I think I saw one for HubSpot and stuff like that. We don't currently have a HubSpot one at this time. Our most immediate ones that are of focus or interest to us is we're exploring Razor's Edge as well, and some other common nonprofit CRM tools next. But those are the 2 that we currently support. All right, any other questions in the chat? I will also go ahead and drop into the chat a link to some of those on-demand classes that I mentioned during the workshop. That can just make it a little bit easier for folks to, in the case where you want to just dig a little bit deeper into some of the topics that, it takes a full hour to go over some of these things, which is why we kind of did a crash course of certain parts. But in the case where you're looking for that, on-demand classes here. And something to also note is that, Deanna will be running a workshop on Financial Planning 101, how to master your budget and forecasting needs in 2021 with Dawn Needs on 4/4. So that's next week. So feel free to check that out in our events calendar as well. You can always access that by just going to our blog, where we have, hundreds of free resources for you in case you are looking to just learn more about grants or just in general nonprofits and improving, free professional development sort of resources like that. Awesome. Let's see. I'm going to do one more pass through on the question sets, and then we'll go from there. Great. I think we have covered everything. Awesome. Well, in the case where you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to us at hello@instrumentl.com. Otherwise, Thank you so much for tuning in today. Hope you learned a ton, and I wish you and your organizations the best of success in the weeks ahead. And yeah, we'll chat soon. All right. Bye now, everybody. Have a great rest of your Thursdays.